What an amazing moment. I mean, suddenly you find yourself essentially running, what uh, certainly then and continues to be, one of the most renowned record labels in America. But, you were there at a moment of very dramatic transition, and Columbia was kind of known, even as the 60s were beginning to become what we think of as the 60s. Columbia was a label that was kind of, it was locked into, earlier music. It was seen as anti-rock and roll. And, the Beatles had signed with another label, the Rolling Stones had signed with another label, Bob Dylan had signed to Columbia, but had not yet emerged as the significant, certainly commercial figure that he's come to be. Describe the feelings and the strategy that you pulled together for yourself as you stepped into that role of running this label.
You get a job that you never thought you'd have. You're not a know-it-all. You want to learn, so you do nothing. You observe, you watch, you evaluate. And the first important point I learned that this label, which was clearly illustrious in certain areas, that those A&R artist repertoire, those A&R people that were working with Tony Bennett or Barbra Streisand or Percy Faith or Ray Conniff, they were fine. These artists were selling records. And to expect them, because I got in, I started listening to WMCA, WABC to hear what the latest top 40 records, the singles that would eventually affect album sales. And there was definitely a break. And so that no matter how gifted the A&R person that was working for them, either there or in original cast albums, because shows was so dominating then. They were the songs as well that the country was hearing and singing. I realized that they're basically specialists. And this new music, this rock and roll, what was happening at Motown, what was happening, with Redbird records, what was happening on the streets was not happening here. Yes, they had Bob Dylan, but his songs were being popularized by Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Byrds. And Simon and Garfunkel, Sounds of Silence was just making it, just getting out there through A&R man Tom Wilson's sweetening of that record. So I was watching, it was fairly precarious. They were making money, but about $3 million pre-tax profit, which was scary. And luck, if you will, to me, played another role where I'd made my first deal, but it was not an artist deal. It was with Lou Adler, the famous producer who did Johnny Rivers and the Mamas and Papas and so many hit records, par excellence producer. I made a deal with him for Ode Records. And our first record was Scott McKenzie, if you're going to San Francisco, be sure to wear flowers in your hair. And I had no idea that presaged what was happening in San Francisco, in Haight-Ashbury, the change of cultures. But Lou and his lawyer, Abe Summers, said to me, come on, you come to Monterey. It's the first pop festival. Simon and Garfunkel will perform at night. The Mamas and Papas will have a great social weekend. So I did go out there with Janet, and we went there totally unsuspecting that there was a revolution. I knew, my God, when I saw everybody with their flowing robes and their flowers and their beads, and here I was the one they were staring at. I had on khaki pants and a white tennis sweater. What else were you going to wear during the... So anyway, I went to the fairgrounds. There were new artists. There was the electrification of the guitar. There were groups like the Electric Flag. And Hendrix and The Who, and this group came on stage. No separate billing. They were just known as Big Brother and the Holding Company. And this incredible young white soul sister named Janis Joplin came out and just was electrified, quivering and shaking and stuttering and just so compelling. And as that set went on, and you looked around and you felt all these different kinds of cultural, musical, social revolutions. If the word epiphany is to have any meaning, I did get that, and it changed the rest of my life. And I knew that I then had to make my first artist move, and I committed myself and ultimately the label to buy her contract, the group's contract. They were under contract to a small record company called Mainstream Records. They had not put anything out. And we bought that contract. I'm not one for banking deals. I've never made a major dollar deal. At the time, this did cost $200,000, of which by that time the famous Albert Grossman was their manager, and we agreed that Columbia would bear half of it, and the other half would be an advance against the group's royalty. So that was the first artist deal, and the first time, but being privy to what I learned at Monterey. A few weeks later, I went to the Village Gate where I saw Al Cooper's Blood, Sweat, and Tears, you know, and the horns in there and the jazz combined with rock. But I was prepared, having seen it. None of my A&R men had been there, had been to Monterey, had experienced what was happening. So I operated rather stealthily because I knew this could be a big competitive advantage. And with the Electric Flag, with the great Mike Bloomfield on guitar and Buddy Miles on drums, with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, we prepared and then released, as we said, the sound of the revolution to be heard around the world. And as these artists broke, and as over the next year or two, the young Santana, I flew out to West Coast, to Fillmore West. Bill Graham, Brian Rohan, his attorney, said, come out there and you see this group fusing Latin, African, rock, blues together. And you knew these were cutting edge artists. And to get to the point, it was over these few years, which included Aerosmith, which ended up with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel separately. These artists, these self-contained cutting artists, that I learned to trust my ears with a healthy self-doubt. Could I be discovering a natural gift that I never, ever would have known that I had? With great skepticism, you know, against a lawyer in the intense music business, you know, but I knew I was there. I was saying this because I'll tell you, make it a little more relevant perhaps later. I knew where I was. I knew when I was being brought to something by an A&R person, or whether I was seeing this artist by myself because of circumstances. So I discovered that I did have a natural gift, an instinct that I was going to follow and build as many great executives around that understood where contemporary music was going, so that the artists would feel comfortable in their home surrounding. And so we built an incredible team. And I took advantage, if you will, of a lucky break and found a career passion for music that has enveloped me and why I'm still doing the same thing today.